Hello guys, welcome to another video. My name is Nick from Mastering Education. If you're new to the channel, thanks for joining. Please do subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content and like the video if you find it helpful. Leave a comment if you have any questions about anything that I've said and I will definitely get back to you. If you're coming back, hello. Thanks for coming back and hopefully you are subscribed to the channel and liking videos, sharing it with friends, trying to build this community to try and help as many people as we can. Now, today's topic is going to be all about analysis. And actually, I was inspired to make this video by a student that I've just started working with privately. This week, he said to me, Nick, I really don't know what teachers mean when they tell me to analyze. He says he thinks he does analysis, but then when he gets back his work, the teachers say, no, you need to analyze more or you need to analyze more in depth. And he just didn't know where to start with that. So I decided, because it's an area that a lot of students struggle with, it's an area where students tend to not fully understand what is meant by it, I decided to make this video. So what I'm going to do is we need to start by looking at the mark scheme. And the reason for that is because the way mark schemes work is they are split into what we call assessment objectives, and they're labeled like a code: AO1, AO2, AO3, AO4, AO5, AO6. For us today with analysis, we are just looking at AO2. And AO2, which you'll see in a moment, is analyzing language and structure techniques. Here's the reason why this is the most important part of English that you need to understand. AO2, the assessment objective, AO2, is the most assessed assessment objective across all of the papers, language and literature. There are more marks to gain on this one assessment objective than any others. So we've got to get it right. We've got to understand it, and we're going to be using it in every single paper. Language paper 1, paper 2, lit paper 1, lit paper 2, regardless of your exam board. So I'm going to start off with explaining what analysis is through showing you the mark scheme. Now, I'm going to use an AQA language paper 1 mark scheme. Do not be put off if you are not doing AQA and think this video isn't for me. It is, because the assessment objectives do not change exam board to exam board. They all have the same assessment objectives. They are all worded exactly the same. The only reason I'm going to use AQA is because I really like the way they break down the different parts that have to go into an analytical paragraph. All exam boards will break it down, but I just think AQA does it best, which is why I'm going to show it. But remember, you can apply the bullet points that we're going to look at to any exam board. Okay, so jumping in then, what we've got up on the screen is a question 2 from language paper 1. How does the writer use language here to describe something? And this is often how analytical questions are laid out, how the writer uses language. Some exam boards like Edexcel actually have a question that is, how does the writer use language and structure? AQA breaks it into 2 separate questions, one for language, one for structure, which is kind of why I think it's a bit of an easier exam board and a bit of an easier paper, but it doesn't matter. Language analysis is language analysis, regardless of the exam board. So, as I was saying, AO2 never changes. The words that don't change are the words that I've just highlighted there. So explain, comment on, and analyze how writers use language and structure to achieve effect and influence readers using relevant subject terminology to support their views. Now, every single exam board has that wording in their paper, their mark scheme. So here is why I think AQA is really good. They break down what they determine to be AO2 analysis into these 3 bullet points, which you can see in the middle column there. So that top one is analyzes the effect of the writer's choice of language. Okay, we are going to tackle each one of these separately on a separate document, which I'm going to put up on the screen in a moment. I'm just covering all 3 for now. So analyzes the effect of the writer's choice of language. The next one, the second bullet point, selects a range of judicious textual detail. Now, I think AQA have used really overly complicated wording for this particular bullet point. Actually, all it means is selects a range of well-chosen quotes. Textual detail just means quotes. I don't know why they didn't just write quotes. That would make much more sense. But anyway, they've got textual detail. And then the last one in orange down there, makes sophisticated and accurate use of subject terminology. Again, why AQA are you using these really fancy, complicated words? Actually, all it means is use sophisticated and accurate techniques or technical terms. So those are things you'll have learned, like similes, metaphor, personification. These are all terms related to the subject, which is English. Just like photosynthesis is a piece of subject terminology for biology, probably. Not very good at biology. So that bottom bullet point then, so at the bottom we've got makes sophisticated and accurate use of subject terminology. And again, AQA have used slightly overly complicated wording here. A lot of people don't really know what they mean by subject terminology. All they mean is techniques. So technical terms that relate to the subject, which is English. Words like simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, alliteration, all of those sorts of things are all those technical terms that we need to put into our answer. So there's actually only 3 bullet points. There's 3 things that AQA have identified as things they will expect to see in an answer, which is related to AO2. So this is my document to hopefully explain it a little bit more clearly and go into a little bit more detail where AQA leave it a little bit up in the air. So first of all, at the top, what is analysis, what the mark scheme says? So it boiled down to 3 things, if you can remember from the mark scheme. The first one was analysis of the effects on the reader. The second one was well-chosen quotes. And then the last one was sophisticated techniques. Now, the next thing that people ask me is, what is a sophisticated technique? What does sophisticated even mean? Well, I guess sophisticated means something that is a little bit more advanced. So I think the way we should look at it is, if you've learned something, a language technique, very early on in your school life, let's take nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. I think even alliteration and similes as well. These tend to be things that we learn very, very early on. And I think what AQA are saying, and I think what all exam boards are expecting, is that when you get into year 11, when you get to GCSEs, we can't really be relying on the things that we learned that long ago, because they're just not that advanced. It's the reason why we're able to teach them to students at a young age, because I think it's quite easy for them to understand the concept of alliteration and simile and understand different word types, nouns, verbs, adjectives, etc. So I think for sophisticated techniques, it's anything other than those ones I've listed. Things like metaphor, hyperbole, personification. You know, these things are slightly more advanced than the things that we learn very, very early on in our school life. So, analytical paragraphs. What should they look like then? Okay, well, have a look at the top 2 there that I've put. Number 1, quote. Because it says in the mark scheme, well-chosen quotes. So we've already established we need a quote. Great. Next, technique. Well, we know we've got to have a technique in our paragraph in order to do analysis, because that's what the mark scheme says. It wanted sophisticated techniques. Great, we've done it. The next one, 3 and 4, the effect on the reader. Now remember, we're getting that term from that very first bullet point in the mark scheme, which said analyzes the effects of the writer's choice of language. Now, this is where a lot of people get stuck, because they aren't sure what would be appropriate to say about the techniques that they've got in front of them. So what I do for my students is I break it down into 2 parts, and I call them the general effect on the reader of a technique, and the specific effect on the reader of a technique. And here's what I mean by those. When I say the general effect on the reader, what I'm thinking about is, what is that technique just designed to do for the reader? Fundamentally, what's the purpose of it? What's the point of it? No matter the context of how the quote is used or how the quote is said, no matter that, what is the technique designed to do? And I've given an example at the bottom there. For example, the general effect on the reader of a simile. So fundamentally, it will never change. The goal of a simile is always to compare. Fundamentally, it will never change. That is its general effect. It's the overall effect of any simile, to compare. And what does that lead to? Well, in my interpretation, generally that will lead to a clearer picture in the reader's mind of whatever it is that's being compared, so we can visualize it a little bit more. So that's step one of analysis, because you need to show an understanding of the technique before you can go into a little bit more detail. So that's why I put it as step 3, before we come on to the slightly more advanced way of looking at effects on the reader, which is the specific effect. So step number 3, the general effect, what the technique is designed to do. Then the fourth one, specific effect. This one, take the word specific. What is the effect of this specific simile? For example, we established that general effect on the reader of a simile was to compare. But do all similes make us feel sad? Do all similes make us feel shocked? No. That would be specifically what that simile is doing for us in the context of which it's used. And that's why I think those two effects on the reader are completely different. They're separate. One is just what a technique is supposed to do. And then the other is, what is this technique actually doing for us? And you'll notice what I've said here is a phrase, how it makes the reader feel. And I've put that in capital letters, how it makes the reader feel. And here is why. The average age of people taking their GCSE is going to be about 15 or 16 years old. Now, I would make an argument that says not a lot of people in that age bracket are overly comfortable talking about feelings and emotions. They'll probably potentially avoid them if they can. So the reason I get my students to always try and get a sense of the emotional response in the reader across in their paragraphs is because it makes them stand out. If the majority of people sitting their GCSEs are not contemplating, are not thinking about how it might emotionally affect a reader, a particular technique, then if you do it, you are going to stand out way more. And here's another thing. It makes you look emotionally sensitive to the text. It makes it look more like you're an A-level student, a more advanced student than just a GCSE student who normally just talks about the simple, basic, obvious, general effects on the reader. The specific effect actually pushes you to try and go a little bit deeper and to try and connect actual readers, potential readers' emotions to a particular technique. That is something that I find with all of my students when I get them to apply this and I get them to confidently apply it, their grades go way up because it just impresses teachers more and it therefore impresses examiners more. And now that last one, further analysis. Step 5, another thing that I would put into a paragraph, and I would do this in order. So this is the kind of thing that I would end on. Now, lots of schools do this. I think it's great. I think it's absolutely great. I think everyone should do it. It is zooming in on a key word. And what we mean by that is select the most interesting word in that quote, regardless of its word type, whether it's a noun, a verb, an adjective, or whatever. Regardless of that, choose the most interesting word, particularly a word that actually helps you answer the question. Always remember to name the word type. Here is something I see quite often. Someone will say, the writer has used the word, whatever it might be, darkness, in order to make the reader feel scared. Now that's fine, that's great, but they've missed the mark because they didn't use subject terminology. Remember that word, the technical term that they could have used. They said the word word. Word is not a technical term. So instead, never write the word word. Write the word type. noun, verb, adjective, adverb. If you know some more fancy ones, it would be things like superlative, exclamative, declarative, things like that. And then once you've identified the most interesting word in that quote, talk about its specific effect on the reader. So talk about how that particular word makes us feel. And what it does is it adds another layer to your analysis. It adds another layer of your thoughts, to your sensitivity and emotional sensitivity to the quote that you're talking about. And it really, really impresses examiners. So how to practice? How do we practice doing this? Well, of course, you're going to practice at school. The teacher is going to set tasks where they're going to give you an extract. There'll be a question and they'll say, right, analyze the language in this short part of the extract and tell us what the effect on the reader is. That's fine. Past papers, great way to practice, fine. But here's another way. What if you've run out of past papers? What if you can't find any for whatever reason, or you've literally done them all? You can go and pick up any book that you might have at home or from the school library or whatever. And I would say choose a random book. Choose one that you've not read before. You could definitely choose one you have read before, but I think it's more interesting if you've got no idea what the context is of the extract you're about to read in that book. So I would take my random book and I would flick through, and then I would just stop at a random page. What I would then do is read that page, just that page. And I would think to myself, okay, what is the style of the writing? What is the tone of the writing? And what, just from this page, is the writer trying to express and trying to make us feel? Once you've got that concept of what is this writing for? What is this writing about? I would then read the extract again and I would pick out as many language techniques and structure techniques, which I'll cover in another video, as I can. So, language techniques are going to need to fit some of those key themes or ideas or the tone that you found when you first read that particular page from the book that you found. Think about how the writer wants us to feel and then create a question. Just make up a question. We know what the format is. It's how has the writer used language to describe something? Or how has the writer used language to make us feel sorry for the character? And then pick out as many techniques as you can. If you can't find any techniques, just pick out really key words. Pick out words which you think might help to express a particular effect on the reader, that might link to the emotion that you initially thought the writer was trying to connect with when you read it for the first time. And that's how you can practice. It's super easy. Lots of people generally have books at home, maybe from parents, siblings, maybe your own books, maybe books you've got for Christmas but haven't read yet. Or, failing that, go online, search up random extract from a novel, read it, and go through that practice, picking out techniques. So, to summarize, AO2, analyze techniques and effects. It's all you need to know. How do we do that? We find a quote. We find a technique in that quote. We think about the general effect on the reader of that technique, what it's designed to do, no matter the context. Then we think about the specific effect on the reader, how it's emotionally going to make a reader feel scared, happy, shocked, angry, whatever it might be. Then do some more further analysis. Zoom in on a key word. Pick out the most interesting word that you can write a lot about and think about, how does that word make us feel? What's shocking about that word? What's scary about that word? Whatever it might be. And don't forget to practice. Remember what I said at the beginning. This is the most assessment objective across all of the papers, no matter the exam board. If you can get confident in this area of English, it will help you in every single paper. In literature, it'll help you on every single question. So don't shy away from analysis. It's actually quite simple once you've looked at the mark scheme and you understand what the words are in the mark scheme. I'm going to go through all of the assessment objectives. But I wanted to start with this one because, as I said, it's something that a lot of people struggle with. They don't understand what the concept of analysis even is. And I wanted to start with this and get it up straight away to try and help you guys. So thank you so much for watching the video. If you made it this far, you must have been learning something. So please do subscribe to the channel so that you can be notified on when I drop the next video. Please like the video as well if you've learned something. Leave a comment below. If there's anything you want me to cover in a video, if there's anything that you weren't sure about in what I said in this video, ask me the question and I will get back to you, I promise. And also, please do consider sharing it with a friend. I'm trying to build a network and a community of people that want to come to this channel to try and get really, really helpful tips from me, but also through my podcast, which is on the channel, which is always with current students, particularly those grade 9 students. And they're going to share their stories and their experiences, hopefully to inspire you guys as well to get better results. So thank you again for watching. I appreciate it. I've been Nick, and I will see you in the next one.